Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon spoilers video. Recently, Bandai just decided to release literally the rest of the Classic Collection, so we have a lot of cards to go over because this is basically just everything that we were missing, and we were about halfway done with the spoilers of the set before they just decided to release all of it. Alright, so going over the cards, starting with the color red, we have a new version of Biyomon. So this Biyomon is looking to be pretty decent because she has this nice inheritable ability where when attacking once per turn, when attacking a player, then you get to draw one card. So this is just really good considering red wasn't the most consistent of colors because it did lack some card draw compared to some of the other colors. So it's definitely really nice to see that we are getting some more card draw in the form of this Biyomon for the color. Next, we have a new version of Bergermon, and this Bergermon isn't really anything too interesting. She has a pretty okay inheritable ability of when attacking, when this Digimon attacks a player, then you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 3000 or less DP. So we've seen this type of ability a couple of times before, maybe not exactly like this, but it's pretty darn similar, and it's just an okay ability to have, considering Red just wants to be attacking the player because of how much damage Red can be doing, and this is a pretty good complementary ability to be attacking the player with by basically getting rid of the opponent's Digimon, and that's just pretty okay. And then as far as to round out what we didn't know that Red was getting in the set, we have Phoenixmon. So this Phoenixmon is pretty decent for a Red level 6. Stat-wise, it's not doing anything too special, but it does have two pretty solid abilities. Its first ability is Security Attack +1, which is rather nice to see, just because we want to try to be dealing as much damage as we possibly can, and we definitely want to be attacking into the player, and Phoenixmon's Security Attack +1 is incentivizing to attack the player to trigger a lot of the abilities, and it even has a nice when attacking ability, where when this Digimon is attacking a player, then we get to draw 2 cards, which is just, again, really good because it adds to the overall consistency of the color, and on top of which we could utilize this with some other very powerful cards to just try to see more cards that we definitely want to be trying to play. So we could utilize this ability to try to deal as much damage as we possibly can, and to try to dig for our Omnimon and use either of the Omnimons to either help control the opponent's board or deal even more damage to the opponent depending on what you're running and how you're running it. Next up, going over the blue cards, we have XVmon. So we kind of already knew that the Imperial Jimon line was going to see some support in the set, and it's definitely nice to see this XVmon, especially considering this XVmon has the really unique aspect of it being able to digivolve off of green or blue, thus adding to the overall diversity on how you could build Imperial Jimon. So you could actually run a green low end and then run this XVmon to transition earlier into your other color, and that's just really powerful and really good considering green as a whole just has some really decent cards to be playing around with on their low end. And then on top of that, this card has both a native ability and an inheritable ability. Its native ability is jamming, which is again just another really good ability to be playing around with, just because it could swing safely into the opponent's security and not really worry about being deleted by the opponent's security Digimon. And it natively having this ability synergizes with the old Imperial Dramon, considering the old Imperial Dramon, at least the blue one from BT03, is all about jamming. So it's just another good card for that. But its inheritable ability is where things get a little bit more interesting, I guess. So its inheritable ability is during your turn, while this Digimon has Imperial Dramon in its name or free in its attribute, then this Digimon gains jamming. So this ability definitely wants to be paired up with all of the new Imperial Dramon stuff, considering the new Imperial Dramon stuff doesn't natively have jamming or any interesting keywords. So the fact that we definitely want to be utilizing this to give the new Imperial Dramon jamming is definitely really nice, but this feels really redundant for the old Imperial Dramon, at least to the blue one, considering it'll have jamming itself, but this will be really good for the green Imperial Dramon from BT03 because it's a way to give it jamming. So So it's a really interesting card to figure out how you want to be utilizing this, just because it is just a really weird and odd ability to be having, and this can affect more than just Imperial Digimon, considering there are a decent number of other free Digimon in the game, and we do have some other transition points, so it's definitely a really interesting card to figure out how we want to be utilizing it. Next, we have a new version of Ikakumon. So this Ikakumon is a pretty solid Digimon. He just has the native ability where during your turn, this Digimon can attack the opponent's unsuspended Digimon with no Digivolution sources. So this is a pretty unique for Blue to be playing around with, considering they haven't really done this before. So this is just really powerful because it's another way you want to be like utilizing attacking the evolution source to attack into the opponent's Digimon, with these types of Digimon being the new form of payout. Next, we have a new Weregurumon. So this new Weregurumon definitely is looking to be a pretty good card to be playing around with for the Garurumon package, because it has the native ability of when Digivolving you get to draw 1, which is pretty good considering when you Digivolve from the Digivolution bonus, you're going to be drawing 1 card by default. So basically, when Digivolving, drawing 2 is just natively really good, and is definitely a really good way of adding lots of cards into your hand, which Garurumon kind of wants to be playing with, and on top of which it has a nice inheritable ability where when attacking once per turn, when we have 8 or more cards in our hand, then we get to gain 1 memory. So this is just really good considering Garurumon, at least the promo Garurumons and some other small Garurumon stuff, wanted to be playing around with having a decent number of cards in your hand, and this is just fitting on theme with that by rewarding you with gaining an additional memory. Next up, we have a new Zudomon. So this new Zudomon is kind of following this new Ikakumon style of play, where it has 2 native abilities. It's when Digivolving ability is being able to trash at the bottom Digivolution source off of one of the opponent's Digimon. So very classic attack the evolution source style of card, and on top of which it also has the ability where during your turn, this Digimon can attack the opponent's Digimon that's unsuspended with no Digivolution sources. So again, it's just doing the same thing as Ikakumon on a level 5, with just the upside of being able to attack the evolution sources when you Digivolve up into them on the field. And then to round out the blue cards that we didn't know, we have a new version of Plesiomon. So this new version of Plesiomon is looking to be pretty good. What this card is doing is it has the nice ability where during your turn, once per turn, when one of your opponent's Digivolution cards is trashed, then you get to draw 2 cards. So this is doing something very similar to Phoenixmon, where it is allowing you to draw 2 cards in some way, shape, or form, and that form, instead of attacking into the player, is getting rid of the inheritable sources, which is just pretty good considering Blue wants to be trying to play around with that type of strategy. And then on top of that, it even has another ability where during your turn, this Digimon can attack the opponent's unsuspended Digimon with no Digivolution sources, again continuing that theme, where you get rid of the evolution source, then you're going to draw 2, and then that allows Plesiomon to attack into the opponent's Digimon, and that's pretty decent considering Blue hasn't really had that meaningful ways of interacting with the opponent's Digimon, so now that they have these cards to attack into their opponent's Digimon, while it's unsuspended with no Digivolution sources, is a really powerful thing for you to be doing and playing around with, and I definitely think that you could create a really interesting build that can capitalize on this type of ability. Next up, on to the yellow cards, we have a new version of Elecmon, and this time Elecmon is making his appearance in yellow. So what this card is doing is he just has a pretty solid inheritable ability of on delete, so one of the opponent's Digimon gains security tech -1 until the end of the opponent's next turn, so it's just your classic security tech minus debuff. Next up, we have a new version of Salamon, and this Salamon is looking to be pretty decent considering it has a nice when attacking ability once per turn. If we have 3 or more cards in our security, then we get to draw 1, and drawing 1 is just always good because it adds to the overall consistency of the color. I don't necessarily think yellow needed something like this, but it's really nice to see that they're playing around with different types of abilities, considering for the most part, yellow wanted to be playing around with 3 or less, and this is a card that's interacting with 3 or more, so it's adding a little bit more aggressive lines of play to what yellow wants to be doing, because at the beginning of the game is when you're usually going to have 3 or more on average, And on top of that, yellow hasn't really had that great of inheritable sources on their lower levels, so I think this is going to be a pretty solid card to be playing around with. Next up, we have a new version of Angemon. So Angemon is looking to be pretty decent with his own inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn. If we have 3 or more cards in our security, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP until the end of the opponent's next turn. So this is really good considering it is a buff that persists through the opponent's next turn, and that's just really good considering it'll make it harder for the opponent to respond to your Digimon, and that's just a pretty solid thing to be doing. So we do have a couple of cards that could really take advantage of this card and definitely make use of this ability. Next up, we have a new version of Magna Angemon, and this is probably one of the best, if not the best, yellow card to come out of the set because of how good this card can be. So what this card is doing is he natively has a when attacking ability, where if we have 3 or more cards in our security, then this Digimon gains plus 4000 DP until the end of the opponent's next turn. So just that first part of his ability that he natively has just makes him a level 5 that can swing for 11 as long as we have 3 or more cards in our security, which is just pretty decent considering we haven't really had very aggressive level 5s, and this is definitely really nice, especially paired up with the Angemon we just saw, where he'll actually be a 12k that can be swinging into the opponent's security. And on top of that, this buff will persist through when you digivolve him into a Mega, so that just makes whatever Mega you're digivolving into even more powerful. And then on top of that, it even has a nice inheritable ability where when a card is added to your security stack, then you get to gain 1 memory. So basically any card that's allowing you to recover in any way, shape, or form, this card is going to be really good with because it'll gain you a memory for just the act of adding cards into our security, which is something yellow really wants to be doing and has been playing around with for quite some time. So I think this card is absolutely fantastic and definitely will birth a whole lot of new and interesting strategies that yellow could be considering to be playing around with. Next, we have a new version of Seraphimon, and this version of Seraphimon seems to be wanting to be played around with the new Magna Angemon for more obvious reasons, but stat-wise, he's not really doing anything too special, but he does have 2 really decent abilities of his own. So his first ability is a when digivolving ability, you get to recover 1, which if we're playing with the new Magna Angemon means that he basically is going to evo for 3 instead of 4 because we're gaining the 1 memory back, which is pretty decent, and its recovery 1 ability just allows us to help heal us and keep our security as healthy as possible. And on top of that, if we're swinging with the Magna Angemon, then this card will be Digivolved Rested, but it'll retain all of the Angemon and Magna Angemon buffs for its other ability, where during the opponent's turn, while this Digimon is suspended, all of your security Digimon get plus 5000 DP, so it's just adding a whole bunch of DP to our security Digimon, and it's going to be rather hard for the opponent to be interacting with Seraphimon with all of the buffs, but even without the buffs, you still have something like Angemon that could keep him nice and buffed. And if he's the only Mega on the field, it'll be hard for the opponent to aggro into our security, just because our security Digimon are going to be more powerful than they normally would be, just adding to the card's overall playability. So I think that this is a really interesting card, and I don't know how good the deck is going to be, but it definitely looks like it's going to be a really fun deck to be playing around with that isn't overly obnoxious, utilizing the recovery mechanic in a different way, and the security in a different way than what Yellow has been doing before. Like, Yellow's been playing around with this before, but it hasn't really been a prominent strategy, so maybe this will just push that strategy forward a little bit. And then the last new yellow card that we got is going to be a new version of Magnadramon. So Magnadramon is a pretty decent Digimon, considering it has 2 really decent abilities. Its first ability is a when digivolving ability, where we get to trash the top card of our security stack to unsuspend this Digimon. So this allows our level 5 to swing, and then we digivolve into Magnadramon, and then we get to unsuspend it and swing again. So pair that up with the Magna Angemon, and that's looking to be pretty decent considering the buff is going to persist. And then on top of that, it even has another ability where when attacking once per turn, if we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, then we get to recover 1. So this is doing something very similar to what Cherubimon is doing, except what Cherubimon is doing is putting a Digimon from our trash into our security, where this is just straight up recovering 1. So this is a pretty decent ability, and again, paired up with Magna Angemon, means that you're going to be gaining the 1 memory. So it's just looking to be another pretty decent card to be interacting with the new Magna Angemon. Next, going over some green cards now, we have Tentomon. So this new version of Tentomon is looking to be pretty good considering he has this nice inheritable ability of when attacking, the next time one of your Digimon would Digivolve into a Digimon with Insectoid or Ancient Insectoid in its type, then we get to reduce the Digivolution cost by 1. So this is pretty decent considering it is reducing the overall Digivolution cost of our Digimon, which is just a whole very classic green thing to do, where we're just trying to be memory efficient on a lot of our Digimon, and this is really good considering we do have some very high-powered Insectoids already in the game that do have high Digivolution costs. So this card helping reduce those evolution costs by 1 is looking to be really good. The only unfortunate thing is this is on a when attacking ability, so you do have to be attacking with a Digimon in order to get this off. But the interesting thing about this card is it doesn't necessarily reference this Digimon, or at least in the translation it's not referencing this Digimon. So you could utilize this in a completely different stack to try to reduce the evolution cost of your other Digimon that you're trying to Digivolve into, which just is pretty interesting to think about, and it definitely makes Tentomon a pretty decent card to be thinking about playing around with. Next up, we have a new version of Palmon, and this Palmon just feels very underwhelming to me. So it has a okay on-delete ability of suspending one of the opponent's Digimon with 5,000 DP or less, and that's just pretty underwhelming as a whole. Like, the 5,000 or less actually could matter considering there are just a lot of 5k blockers out in the game, but this card doesn't necessarily seem like, at least on surface level, is going to be doing a whole lot, considering I think there's just other better cards that you could be playing, especially ones that rest the opponent's Digimon down. Next up, we have a new version of Kabuterimon, and this Kabuterimon is looking to be pretty okay. It is unfortunate that he can't continue the trend with all of the other Kabuterimons where he evos for 1, but he doesn't have that bad of stats, being 4 to hard play and 5,000 DP, and on top of which he does have a really nice when attacking ability where you could Digivolve this into one of your Digimon with Insectoid from your hand by paying its Digivolution cost. So this is really good because paired up with the Tentomon, it'll reduce the Digivolution cost of the Digimon you're going to be Digivolving into as long as it's Insectoid, otherwise you wouldn't be able to utilize this ability. But I digress, and just on swing, Digivolving just seems really good. Next, we have a new Togemon. So this new Togemon is looking to be pretty okay with a nice inheritable ability of during your turn once per turn, when one of your opponent's Digimon becomes suspended, then this Digimon gains plus 2,000 DP, so it's just another way of DP boosting your Digimon for the act of suspending the opponent's Digimon down, which green has a lot of ways of doing, so I don't know how good this card is going to be, but the ability of gaining plus 2,000 DP for something that green is already going to be doing is just pretty okay. Next up, we have a new version of Stingmon. So more Imperial Jamon support, and this Stingmon is following a very similar pattern to the XVmon that we saw earlier, where stats are basically the exact same. It could evo off of green and blue as a level 4, so you could utilize a blue transition into green that much earlier if you wanted to, and it has the piercing ability natively, which is pretty okay, considering piercing is just a very strong ability to be playing around with, especially if you're utilizing any buffs. There's just a whole bunch of things that you could try to utilize the piercing ability with, and then on top of which, it even has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, if this Digimon has Imperial Jamon in its name or free in its attributes, then this Digimon gains the piercing ability. So this is really good with the blue Imperial Jamon from BT03, just because that one doesn't have a piercing, and this is a way to give it piercing, so it could be utilized there, and on top of which, it could be utilized with the new Imperial Jamon, considering the new Imperial Jamon doesn't have any keywords, but if you're playing the green green Imperial Digimon from BT03, then I think this ability is a little bit redundant, but this definitely seems like it could be pretty okay on some of the other level 5s that have free in their attribute, so who's to say how good this card is actually going to be, or how this card's going to be used. It's just another tool to the toolbox to think about utilizing. Next up, we have a new Mega Kabuterimon, and this new Mega Kabuterimon is looking to be a really powerful Digimon, considering he has a really powerful when attacking ability, where you could Digivolve this into one Digimon with Insectoid or Ancient Insectoid in its type from your hand by paying the evolution cost. So this is probably the best card to utilize Tentamon's ability with, because you're going to swing, utilize Tentamon's ability to reduce the Evo by 1, then Mega Kabuterimon is going to allow you to Digivolve right up into your Mega, and just being able to tempo into your higher levels is already really, really good, and on top of which it even has a nice inheritable ability where when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon by battle and survives, then you get to gain 1 memory. So ideally what you're going to be trying to do is swing with Mega Kabuterimon with Tentamon underneath, Digivolve into one of your Megas, and then reduce the evolution cost of that Mega by 1, and hopefully whatever Mega you're going to be utilizing will have the Piercing ability or an ability that just allows you to want to swing into the opponent's Digimon and gain some benefit for doing so. So I think this Mega Kabuterimon is going to be a pretty decent card to be playing around with, especially if you're planning on building a Insectoid or Ancient Insectoid type deck. Next, we have a new version of Dino-Beamon. So this new version of Dino-Beamon is doing something very similar to the Paildramon that we saw previously in the spoiler season, where he Digivolves for 3 on blue or green, so you could utilize him in some interesting ways with that. And then on top of which, he has a nice when Digivolving ability, where if this Digimon has a Digimon with free in its attribute in its Digivolution source, then we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon with 5000 DP or less. So this is just a way of trying to rest more of the opponent's Digimon down, and that's pretty okay considering on the new Imperial Digimon. It just has some good synergy trying to rest multiple targets down, and with the old Imperial Digimons, then you get to try to suspend a target down, so that way, ideally, they won't be able to block. So it's just looking to be a pretty decent card to be utilizing for those, and on top of which it has a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, when your Digimon with Imperial Digimon in its name deletes an opponent's Digimon and survives the battle, then you get to gain 1 memory. So it's supporting more of the piercing style, which is definitely what the green half has been doing, is supporting piercing. But now that we could promote and support piercing in the blue half as well, it definitely seems like a pretty interesting card to be thinking about utilizing, considering the old Dino-Beamon wasn't really doing much himself. It was just the fact that he had jamming and piercing natively, made him really decent to be considering, but now that we have another option, who's to say we won't be playing some piercing in the new blue side of Imperial. And then we have a new version of Rosemon, and this Rosemon is looking to be pretty okay. So she has 2 abilities native to her, where her first ability, during your turn, this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP for every suspended Digimon the opponent has, is just a very classic green thing to do. We've seen this ability before on the Kabuterimon and on the Gargamon and Rapidmon, so you could potentially utilize those cards with this card to try to suspend the opponent's Digimon down and gain a lot of DP for that, and she even has a nice when attacking ability where she allows you to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon down, which is really important for green, considering a big part of green is like this control aspect, but it's still just a pretty decent ability to have overall, just because suspending things is what green wants to be doing. Next, on to the black cards, we have a new version of Caramon. So we are getting some Diaboromon support, so it's no surprise to see this here. But what this is doing for Diaboromon is it has the nice inheritable ability where during your turn, for each other Digimon you have in play with the same name as this Digimon, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP. So ideally with one Diaboromon token, it's going to give your main Diaboromon plus 1000. The more tokens you spawn, the stronger he'll get, and that's kind of like the whole thing. And I think that this is going to be a pretty good card to be utilizing, considering a lot of the Diaboromons just don't have a whole lot of DP, so ensuring that they're going to be surviving whatever swing they're going to be doing is really, really nice. And on top of this, you could utilize this ability to just try to gain more DP to try to formulate some other strategies with Diaboromon. So you could even consider the line of play where if you just are able to get enough DP, then you could even Zubagon punch a Diaboromon, and that just seems really good, all thanks to the possibilities that this card is bringing. Next, we have a new Hagurumon. So this Hagurumon is going to be playing around with the Machine and Sideboard deck, just because what this card's doing is he has the nice on-play ability, where you get to trash a Digimon with Machine or Cyborg in its type to draw 2 cards, and that's really good because at worst, he's basically just replacing everything that you're losing because you have to play him, which means you're not Digivolving, which means you're not going to be drawing for that, and you're going to be discarding a card, which means that you're losing a card in your hand. So being able to draw 2 cards is just already really good. On top of which, you're really just trying to utilize this card to just discard your Cyborgs, so that way you could have enough cards in your trash to set up a really powerful Machine Dramon, because the new Machine Dramon wants as many different Cyborgs in your trash as possible. But this allows you to also discard your machines, so that's just another really powerful aspect of the card, is just how many cards this is affecting and what this card could be played with. Next, we have a new Kurasarimon, so more Diaboromon support, and what this Kurasarimon is doing is he has the inheritable ability of, during your turn, once per turn, when another Digimon with the same name as this Digimon is deleted, then you get to unsuspend this Digimon. So the whole idea behind what Diaboromon is doing is just spawning Diaboromon tokens, and then you're going to want to try to aggress with those tokens and your main Diaboromon. So it's definitely a pretty interesting ability to be playing around with. I don't know how good it's going to be, considering the other Kurasarimons just have a ton of utility themselves. So this is just, again, another tool adding to the toolbox, allowing you to create some really interesting and diverse decks, just because you have more options and possibilities to be playing around with. Next, we have a new version of Gardramon. So this Gardramon is looking to be one of your more classic style blockers, at least on his first half, where he's 2 to Evo, 5 to hard play, and 6,000 DP. Then he just has the blocker ability and a ability where during your turn, this Digimon can't attack. So he's actually slightly weaker in that aspect to your normal average blocker, but he does come with an inheritable ability, which most blockers don't. And that gives this card a lot more playability, considering it has a really good inheritable ability of, when attacking, you may trash a Digimon with Machine or Cyborg in its type to draw 2 cards, and that's just really good because it's just fitting on theme with what the Machine and Cyborg Digimon want to be doing in the set, where you're going to be trying to figure out ways to discard them to get them into the trash for Machine Dramon, and this Gardramon allowing you to draw cards while putting cards in your trash seems like a really good idea and strategy to be playing around with. Next up, we have a new version of Edamon. So it looks like the Edamon cards are going to be getting some support, and the Edamon package is looking to be a lot stronger now just because of these cards having more Edamons and Metal Edamons as targets. So what this card is doing is he has a native ability where during your turn, when this Digimon digivolves into a Digimon with Edamon in its name from your hand, you get to reduce the memory cost of the Digivolution by 1. So it just allows you to digivolve into your Metal Edamons that much more efficiently, which is really good because the Metal Edamons have an Evo cost of 3, so that means it reduces it to 2, and that's just very tempo efficient. This Edamon also has a really good inheritable ability where during your turn, while this Digimon has Edamon in its name, then this Digimon gains jamming. And that's pretty decent considering we know that the other Metal Edamon has the ability to be unblockable, so unblockable and jamming just seems like a pretty good combo of abilities, and that's just what makes this type of package really decent. Unfortunately, this inheritable will only affect the Edamons and not the level 7s, but it's still just a pretty decent card to be playing around with for the Edamon package. And then we do also get a new Metal Edamon to round out the package even more, just because the previous Metal Edamon was alright, and the previous Edamon just allows us to try to play our Metal Edamons for free off of his on-delete ability, so that's just giving us another Metal Edamon as a target for that, making it just a really good idea to consider playing if you're playing that package. And then on top of which he has 2 abilities of his own, where he has a very similar style of ability ability where during the opponent's turn, for each of your Digimon with Edamon in its name in your trash, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP. So the other Metal Edamon also had another ability where during the opponent's turn, it just gains plus 2000 DP, making it a little bit harder to interact with. So this is just following in that same footsteps. It's just it's based on how many Edamon type cards are in your trash. And then it also has a pretty underwhelming on delete ability of being able to de-digivolve one of the opponent's Digimon, which it's still pretty decent of an ability to have, considering it could also just have had nothing, but it could have also had a slightly better effect. Again, it's just another Metal Edamon to be playing around with in the Edamon package, and I don't think the Edamon package was meant to be super hardcore competitive. It's just a fun, casual thing to be doing, and now that it has more support, it's looking to be even more fun than it was before. Next, we have a new Boltmon, and this new Boltmon is just a very basic level 6 to be playing around with. He did get color shifted from purple to black, and stat-wise, he's not doing anything too special. He's just 4 to Evo, 12 to hard play, 12,000 DP. We've seen that stat line so many times before, but he does have two abilities of his own. He first has a reboot ability native to him, so you are allowed to play a solid reboot package along with him, and that could be pretty decent. And then on top of which, he has a when digivolving ability of de-digivolve one on one of the opponent's Digimon, and I'm not super thrilled with de-digivolve, but it can matter and it can come in handy, so I don't think that Boltmon is like the worst Digimon in the world. He's just very underwhelming and very basic, but he does seem like he could be pretty decent, especially in a Pauper style deck, where he could be another really good mega to be considered using, and it allows you to also utilize the reboot package, and that could just be enough for that format. Next, onto the purple cards, we have a new version of Tapermon. So Tapermon here, stat-wise, is just very basic for a level 3, but he does have a nice inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when one of your other Digimon is deleted, then you get to draw one card, and there's just a whole bunch of self-sacrificing strategies, or you could even use this just to be aggressive with, for a lot of your other Digimon, just to try to get them deleted, so that way you could draw cards off of their deletion, and he definitely seems like he has a lot of combo potential with a lot of other cards. So the first thing that comes to my mind is like a Chaos Gallantmon deck, where you could utilize Chaos Gallantmon to try to delete your other Digimon, and then you'll be drawing a card for their deletion, and that could be pretty good. So he seems like he could be a pretty decent card for a whole bunch of purple decks to be playing if they just want more card draw. Next, we have a new version of Wizardmon, and this Wizardmon is looking to be pretty decent, actually. He first has a retaliation ability native to him, so his DP doesn't really matter, even though it is on the lower side for a level 4, because you're just going to be trying to utilize his retaliation ability to try to swing into the opponent's Digimon with Wizardmon if you're utilizing him for that. But he also has another really powerful inheritable ability where during your turn, all of your Digimon with retaliation gains the Rush ability. So this is really good because we previously saw a Devimon that just has retaliation as a level 3. So any mega paired up with that could res the Devimon will give the Devimon Rush, or any mega that could res any level 4s with retaliation with him underneath will also give those Digimon Rush as well, and that could be pretty powerful depending on the types of support and synergy that you're utilizing. So you could utilize this in something like a Purple Metal Garurumon deck with the promo Purple Metal Garurumon, and then you could utilize Nailbone to res a Devimon and a Demi-Devimon with the retaliation ability, and even though the Demi-Devimon can't attack into the opponent's Digimon, having it still have the Rush ability makes it a lot more playable, just because you could still swing with the card right away, making this version of Wizardmon an absolutely fantastic card to be playing for a lot of potential decks. Next, we got a new version of Devimon, and this new version of Devimon is looking to be pretty okay, considering he just has a very generic inheritable effect of, on delete, returning one purple Digimon that's level 4 or lower from your trash to your hand, and it's just a generically okay ability. Like, there's nothing too special about it, except it's just not playing the Digimon, which is a little bit unusual for purple, but purple being a really solid color, adding cards to its hand allows you to figure out different ways on how you want to utilize that card, whether you could utilize it to discard or utilize it to try to enhance your further plays because you now have that card in your hand. Makes it just a really good card to be considering, on top of which this is probably a really decent card for the Dan Devimon deck, just because it allows you to recycle your Devimon promos to try to figure out more ways on how to build and play the Dan Devimon. Next, we have a new version of Lady Devimon, and this new Lady Devimon is just another pretty decent and pretty generic card. She has a when Digivolving effect native to her, where you get to trash the top 3 cards of your deck. So she seems like she also wants to go in that Dan Devimon style of deck, where you just utilize her to try to trash 3 to fill up your trash with as many Devimons as quickly as possible, but other decks can utilize this level of mill as well. And then on top of that, she has a pretty okay inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when you play a Digimon from your trash, you get to gain 1 memory. So this is really good with Metal Garurumon, this is really good with Crest Garurumon, this is really good with Chaos Gallantmon. There's just a ton of different cards that you could utilize this with just to gain that 1 memory, and sometimes that 1 memory could be enough, especially if it's on a when Digivolving ability. And again, there's just a ton of utility to this ability, making her just a pretty decent card to be considered playing. Next, we have a new version of Skullgreymon, and the interesting thing to note with this Skullgreymon is he does evo off of red and purple, so we have a little bit more red-purple synergy. Previously, it was only seen on the Chaos Gallantmon stuff with Megidramon, so it's interesting that we're getting a little bit more here, and this Skullgreymon is looking to be a pretty okay Digimon in his own right because he just natively has Security Attack +1, so it allows him to be very aggressive the second you go into him. And then on top of that, he does have another ability where at the end of the attack, you have to delete this Digimon, and then he has an on-delete ability where you may play 1 Agumon from your trash suspended without paying its memory cost. So that's just a lot to break down considering he technically has 3 abilities. We haven't really seen a whole lot of at the end of the attack abilities triggering, so after you swing and get the security checks off of Greymon, he's going to delete himself, thus triggering his own on-delete ability to play an Agumon for free, and playing an Agumon for free is pretty decent considering we have a whole bunch of different Agumon we could be utilizing. So I think this Skullgreymon is going to be a pretty interesting card to be playing around with, and I think that he can make some really interesting builds utilizing this card. Next, we have a new version of Piedmon. So this is the second Dark Master to get a new version, and what this Piedmon is doing is he has an on-play ability where you get to delete 4 of the opponent's unsuspended level 4 or lower Digimon. So he definitely seems like he wants to hose on Rookie Rush because they could swarm the board very easily, and Piedmon can basically on play pick everything apart. And then on top of that, he also has a during your turn once per turn ability. When a opponent's Digimon is deleted, then you get to draw 1 card. So basically for utilizing his on-play ability, you're going to be drawing a card, thus replacing himself, and that's just pretty okay. He doesn't seem like the best Digimon in the world to be playing, but he's definitely not the worst either. It's just hard playing certain Digimon can be relatively hard, so I don't know how good he's going to be, especially compared to the other Piedmon, where he could just flood the field, and this one is basically doing the exact opposite, where he's trying to take apart the opponent's field. And then we got a couple of new options that we could be playing with. So the first one is a new purple option where it is Fight for Your Pride. And this has the main ability of you get to play 1 of your level 4 or lower purple Digimon from your trash for free. And then if you have a Digimon with Myotismon in play, then 1 of your Digimon gains the blocker ability until the end of the opponent's next turn. So this is a pretty interesting considering it's just another res card. We've seen a whole bunch of res cards where it's just resing a specific level. So this is just resing any level 4 or lower Digimon, and then we can make any Digimon blocker as long as we have a Myotismon on our field. So it has some pretty interesting utility to it there, especially since we know that there's a lot of Myotismon support in the set, so it only makes sense that there's just more Myotismon support. And then on top of that, it has a security ability of allowing you to play a level 4 or lower Digimon from your trash for free, which can be pretty powerful considering level 4 is where the majority of blockers are, or you could utilize this to res a level 3, and it does get its on play ability, same with the level 4, so it just has a ton of utility and flexibility on how it can be played, and what you want to be resing with it. And then the last card that we got shown and a new white option card that's going to be in the set is going to be 60% win rate. So this is a 2-cost white option card that has the ability where if you have a tamer in play, then we could utilize this option ignoring its color requirements. So we could use this with basically any color for any color. As long as we just have a tamer in play, it doesn't necessarily matter what tamer it is. And then on top of which, it has a really decent main ability where the next time one of your Digimon would Digivolve, you get to trash 1 card from your hand with the same color as the Digimon you're Digivolving into to reduce the memory cost of that Digivolution by 4. So because this costs 2 to play, it's basically like reducing the evolution by 2, because we still have to play this option, but there's just a ton of flexible and diverse options in which this card can be utilized. Yes, you do have to basically -1 for yourself because you are drawing off of the Digivolution, so the card is at least replacing itself, but you're not replacing the card you're discarding. But because there's just so much draw in Digimon, I don't necessarily know if that matters, and this is good for basically any deck that's trying to Digivolve into an expensive Mega, just because it is helping reduce the evolution cost, and the discard actually could matter for a whole bunch of different decks that want to utilize the trash or utilize discarding cards. So it does have a decent amount of flexible and diverse options on how you could play the card. This isn't a card meant for every deck, just because the lower the Evo cost, obviously the worse this card is going to be to utilize on. But regardless, it definitely seems like a really good card to consider utilizing. I don't know if this is going to be a staple in every single deck, but it seems like it's a pretty solid card to be utilizing for a whole bunch of different decks. So like some of the decks that I thought up of immediately was like you could utilize this with Jesmon to try to Digivolve into your Omnimons more efficiently because you could discard a Sistermon, which Jesmon is just going to res anyway. You could utilize this with basically any purple deck. You could utilize this with Black Machines. You could utilize this with like an All-Force deck. There's a whole bunch of green decks that could utilize this. Like it does have just a ton of usability. It's just I don't think it's going to be like a hardcore must-play 4 of staple in every single deck ever. But it does seem like it's a pretty decent card to be considering to utilize it nonetheless, and I definitely think that it could be a very good and effective card if used properly. And then on top of that, it even has the security ability of adding this card back to your hand, so that way you could figure out when and how you want to utilize this to its utmost potential. And with that, we know all of the cards that are going to be in the Classic Collection. And I think the Classic Collection, even though it is a smaller set than our usual set, still has some really good cards and still holds a ton of possible potential in it. And it is just only unfortunate that Japan literally only gets 1 month with the set, and the English format will only get like 2 months with the set. So it does seem like it's going to fly by really quickly when we get these cards and when Japan gets these cards. But I think that a lot of these cards are still going to be really decent and help upgrade a lot of older decks. And that's kind of like the whole point of the set, is to just go through and update some older decks and give new life and new blood into them. And I really like the direction that they're heading in, and I hope that they continue with doing these a little bit more. But outside of that, I like the set, and I think it's going to be a pretty fun and interesting set as a whole. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are different ways that you could support me in the channel. So one of those ways is I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so whenever you use that affiliate link to buy cards off of tcgplayer.com, then some of the money will go to supporting me in the channel. And on top of which, I also do stream over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu. So following and subbing is a good way to support me over on that platform as well. And on top of that, I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook. So whenever you buy one of my designs through them, then some of that money will also help go to supporting me in the channel. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.